A custom ERP could be the greatest lever in your business for efficiency or the biggest drag. And the difference between the two happens before a single line of code gets written. So here are 5 things nobody tells you about building your own custom ERP that can make or break your build. Here's a quick bit of context. My name is Jake Haynes. I'm the co-founder of Pilot West Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. We've become quickly one of the leading providers of custom software development for ERPs for the industries of transportation, logistics, manufacturing, and construction. And why it's important is because we turn away around 80 or 90% of the people that we speak with because custom software isn't for everyone. And so we live this every day, and I want to break down what are the 5 things you need to look out for that'll make or break your build if you do decide to build. It starts with number 1, which is why build anything at all? It's a question we legitimately ask anyone that comes to us wanting to build custom software, because 80 or 90% of people are usually better with something off the shelf. So the real question really is for you, it's not what to build, but why are we considering building to begin with? Here's a green light for you if you have been considering custom software and it might be a good fit for you, is if you've searched for years, nothing fits uniquely to your business, or there's a very quantifiable pain. When we ask that question of why are you building at all, they can point and say, this is exactly why. I can't solve this problem. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried. It's like, okay, you have a legitimate concern that can actually be solved. That's very quantifiable that we can reverse engineer and solve. However, this is a big red light. If we talk to somebody, we ask that question and they just kind of feel like they're obligated or it's the right thing to do, but they can't point to really any pain or time or money that's quantified in their problem, then that shows that they're either too early or custom does not make sense for them. So first, you have to ask yourself, why are we trying to build? And second, quantify the pain. What is it costing you today? What is the cost of staying in the situation? And for those who are sure and who haven't defined this already, I want to plug a free ERP calculator that I built personally. And in 3 minutes, it tells you what you're losing per year based off your workflow and which buckets you fall into, whether that be building custom, integrating your current solutions, or maybe getting something off the shelf. So it'll help define not only your ROI, but what bucket generally you fall in that might be the best situation for you. Number 2, I want us to drop ERP entirely because that word is not working for you in this process. Why? Well, because the word ERP or the term is broad, it's outdated, it's an umbrella term. It anchors you to a vague category of, I just want this thing to do everything, usually for most people, than a specific outcome. And when I think about the clients who have come to us, who have been great clients, who came to us wanting to build a custom ERP, they all have come for different reasons, for different workflows, for different problems, even though it's under the generic phrase ERP. So you have to drop the term and just ask yourself, what am I building? Name the specific workflow, not what is the ERP. The third is defining your North Star. Don't replicate features from the other ERP, but you have to get very granular on where you're heading. Let me explain. We have, I'd say, probably the best workflow in building effective custom ERPs. Why? Because we have what's called North Star development, which is just really walking through our clients before we build anything. What are we specifically solving for? How much is it costing you? And so we articulate all those things on the front end so that everyone's aligned, whether that be product, developers, the users, the department heads, the CTOs, whoever else is involved in this process. We've articulated the goal for what this next phase needs to look like, let's say over the next 2 or 3 months. What does our business need to look like, so that we've articulated the problem, we know the desired end state, and then everybody can align in that same direction. So if you are a technical leader, I really would prefer you not to roll your eyes, but this is really where, whether you're technical or not, a ton of value gets added, is by removing yourself out of the technicalities of languages and features and really articulating what does the business need to look like? What are the business needs here? And if we can articulate that well, then at the end of this, you can build the first phase within 2 to 4 months and then look back and say, all right, have we achieved this goal? If you haven't, you can continue to iterate. And if you have, then you can move on to the next phase, articulate that, and keep it moving. That's how we are able to save our clients, users, 1 to 3 hours per day. And efficiency when we build is because we spend a lot of time really articulating what is it that we're actually solving for, so that we can ensure that we're all headed in the same direction and we're solving real business problems, not just building software or replicating features. And if your team's focused on the wrong things, or different department heads are adding their own ideas of what should occur, or the scope begins to expand because everyone's getting really excited and wants to add all these things to it, then if no one's focused, no amount of budget or time is going to fix you being able to build an effective system. That actually leads me to point number 4, is that scope creep is what actually kills these projects. And for those who may not know or who are not technical, scope creep just means essentially a project goes beyond the original timeline and budget. And maybe you've experienced that with a contractor before. You hired somebody to, let's say, build a deck, and they said, yeah, I could do that for 30 grand and it'll be 2 months, and then 60 grand and 4 months later, it's still not done. See, that's an idea of scope creep. And unfortunately, nearly every client who's come to us has used an agency before and has had this story. They were underquoted for their project, and then it blows past both the timeline and the cost. In fact, there's a 9-figure distributor that's a client of ours where they're rebuilding one of their old applications about a decade ago. And the agency told them, yeah, well, we can do that for $1 million in 1 year. 2 years later and $2.5 million later, they still weren't done. And what's even more hilarious, or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, is that the agency was overbilling for the developers on the project, meaning that I think they were charging them for 4 developers on the project, and when they're only really using 2. The client found out and just kindly asked them to be billed moving forward for the only 2 developers that they were using. And then the agency sued them for breach of contract. Unfortunately, that's not entirely uncommon. But like we mentioned prior, the North Star helps you ensure that you're not getting into this huge scope creep, but you can stay very efficient and focused on each problem throughout the business as you're adding more onto the system. And again, we say that a phased approach is almost certainly the best approach for 95% of situations, meaning instead of putting your head down and having your developers work for an entire year before they ship the ERP, instead build one thing to solve one problem within 2 to 3 months, ship it out, get a ton of user testing, so that the business can continue to iterate and you can pull more and more features and modules out of the ERP if that's what you're replacing. And then you don't disrupt the business. You're adding value to the business because you're building effectively. And there's no huge, scary turn off this thing, turn on this thing, and where everybody's trying to get trained and used to it. They've already been used to it. You've already pressure tested it with the right users, and you've been able to make it efficient. So that is a very effective way to ensure that you can add value to the business and ensure that you're not going to experience scope creep if you stay focused phase to phase to phase. And lastly, I hope you hear me out here because this is genuine, because my pocketbook would suggest that I should suggest the opposite to you, which is don't rebuild everything in your tech stack, every bit of software, even though you can. Listen, we are not a build-first software development shop. Why? Because if we have a client and they come to us and we're building some part of their business and they have a tool that they're used to that works, and more importantly has an API that we can integrate together, then that's a win-win-win for everybody. Then we don't have to spend time building something that's redundant. They don't have time disrupting or figuring out something new because we're just trying to build custom for the sake of building custom. And if someone or a developer or an agency is suggesting you to do so, then I would run away. And for those who don't know or may not be technical, an API, just think of it like a door between software that allows data to go back and forth between different software. So instead of it being where there's siloed data from copy pasting thing from this window to this window to this window, which I'm sure some of you might feel that, instead allows software to connect together so that data can flow on its own in and out of the software, which just means you can kind of get that feel of custom software, even if it's an off-the-shelf tool, because everything's working together and data is flowing as it should. So don't rebuild everything, only build custom where it really matters, where you're either super unique or where you can't really find that tool to fit your business, and that's where you're going to add the most value. But don't build just because you can. Integrate everywhere else if you have tools that already work. So again, a custom ERP can be the greatest lever or the greatest drag. It's just dependent on you articulating these things on the front end before you build anything at all. And if you are a person who's going down this route, but you don't have a development team, you don't have a trusted tech guy, so to speak, then I want to list my booking link below where you can meet with me personally. I'll take a look at your situation and I'll tell you honestly if you should build or not. If we come to the conclusion that building does make the most sense, then we'll begin to outline what this could look like for your business. For everyone else, I hope this was helpful and you have a great rest of your day.